late in the day, but everybody's probably tired like I am. When Randy Parker, who I thought was a friend, invited me to this session, well, by the way, I'm walking around because I got an iPhone in my back pocket, because I got an iPhone to tell my daughter I'm part liberal now. She's liberal. And it tells me how far I've walked, and since I'm a fat guy, an old guy, I'm trying to get in shape, so this makes me feel better when I leave the meetings. So if I walk around, that's what I'm doing. And I got a laser too, so be careful. Anyway, when he asked me to come to the meeting, I was under the impression, and I'm old enough to know better and ask the right questions, but I didn't, that I was going to be in a meeting with 20 to 30 people in an informal setting and just talk. Imagine my surprise when I found out otherwise. But it's okay. It was my own fault, Randy. Anyway, I'm glad you're all here. I've heard some really good discussions, and I'm not patronizing. I was really excited about what I heard. Reg, if I get the name right, Reg Johnson's discussion, Greg Sheehan's, Randy Parker's, and both the congressional delegations really fired me up. I didn't realize that much stuff is going on, and it's exciting. Hope you guys are excited too, because we have legislation or legislative individuals that are actually doing a lot for us. And I know most of you know your county commissioners, and Paiute, Garfield, Kane, and so on are doing a lot for Wayne County. I just met with Wayne County this morning over breakfast. They're doing a lot for you. It's exciting. You got people that aren't corrupt politicians, you got politicians that are helping you. And that's how you're going to prevail. Because we need a shakeup, a big shakeup from what's transpired since the Clinton administration and government agencies. A big shakeup. And the only way that's going to occur is by strong action through political, legal, and technical, which Eric did a good job of presenting before me. Anyway, my discussion is going to be, if I fall over, it's because I'm not drunk, but I have a new ankle. I'm bionic. Sometimes my bionic thinks for itself. Anyway, I'm going to be discussing proactive and reactive approaches. I'll define it first, but I'd like to start off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor from 161 AD to 180 AD. And I want you to keep that in mind when you listen to me, and I want you to, I'm sure you've already kept it in mind when you listen to everybody else. And that's this: everything we hear is opinion, not fact. Everything we see is perspective, not truth. And that goes for everything I'm sharing with you as well. So bear that in mind. Use your brain, you know that you all have good ones, and assess what people are saying here today and in the future when you work with the agency people and environmental groups and whatever things you get involved with. Keep that in mind. This up here that you got, your biggest tool. Okay, what are proactive versus reactive approaches? A reactive approach is essentially hiding and hoping you'll be ignored and you can make a deal and or a federal agency just might decide to treat you okay. How many of you done that? I get hired by people all the time to do that. Okay? It's not unusual. That's the reactive approach. Wait until they write an EIS, write a decision, affects your neighbor, no big deal. Affects you, then you get a lawyer. It's too late. Rarely do you prevail in those circumstances. Rarely do you prevail with the reactive approach. And that's what my good friend here was presenting to you on different types of way of collecting data, and what they did with the sage grouse is exciting. I've worked in the sage grouse issue on numerous occasions, and what he told me I was not aware of. He shared it with me before the presentation, and I wanted to make sure he had time to present it, so I suggested he go first. Anyway, the proactive approach would be to do, as Eric indicated, collect data. However, in 40 years, over 40 years, and most of the guys that are on my team have between 40 and 45 years experience. Some of them walk better than I do. They have asked ranchers repeatedly to collect data, and I never get ranchers, have never been able to get ranchers to collect data. Why? Because they're preg testing, they're fixing trucks, they're taking kids to ball games, they're doing what the wife tells them to do. They got a leak on the barn roof, they got to get the hay up. They're busier than one-armed paper hangers. So I don't ask ranchers to collect data for themselves anymore. But it is a thing you should consider doing. Actually, I do, but I don't expect anything. What I suggest is, well, I'll suggest it later on in the presentation. When you're dealing, the other part of the proactive approach that you can do that that isn't involved in collecting data is you can ensure that the federal agencies and whatever actions they take are consistent with their laws, their regulations, and their planning documents and their policies. Every court case that I win, I've got a long list of them, I win primarily because the agency doesn't follow their own regulations. So you want to make sure that you double check that. That's a proactive approach. Make them, sometimes they don't follow their own regulations because they don't know it, to be quite frank with you. And you can perhaps turn the tide by being aware. And sometimes you're going to have to hire somebody that knows what those regulations are. I don't advise hiring attorneys. They cost 3 or 4 times what consultants do. And in most instances, they settle. Attorneys like to settle, not fight. Most consultants that I know are pretty good fighters. They'll stand beside you through any kind of brawl that you get into. But get somebody that can help you understand what the environmental documents can say legally and can't say legally. Because the agencies consistently, repeatedly, one of the examples that I give you today, you'll see that. I'm not talking just off the top of my head. I got exact examples that have happened within the past 5 years in this state. Okay? Consistently violate their own regulations and law and policies. And expect you to abide by them. And if you don't abide by them, you get trespassed or notice of noncompliance or something else. And you're a bad boy or a bad girl. Okay. The proactive actions overall that I suggest then are 12 of them. Some of them have been touched upon today by the other individuals. I'm not sure that they touched on this one. And this one is grazing permittees should pool their financial resources through a newly formed cooperative state grazing district, similar to what Montana has. Montana pays their grazing bills and everything through the cooperative state grazing districts. If there's a trespass action or an adverse action, it goes through the cooperative state grazing districts. They got a lot more bucks than me as a lonely rancher by myself with 200 head of cattle, unless I sell everything. Then, but to do that, secondly, then you want to hire an environmental consultant that has a record of being assertive and or aggressive in dealing with federal government, not just collecting consultant fees, writing pretty reports, I've read a lot of those, and advising you to settle, because it's the best deal when you get in an adverse action with the agency. That means individual ranchers, the national and local livestock associations, Farm Bureau, State Department of Agriculture, Extension Service, would unite for a common goal. No one rancher should have to take this on by themselves. What that means, it's not a new philosophy in this country. The bottom line is, what that means is we need a National Rifle Association type organization to represent the federal land livestock grazing rights in America in the same manner that the NRA represents gun owners effectively in America for some years now. You can't do it alone. It's too expensive. And I'll give you an example to tell you that just happened. Okay, the second thing is continue obeying all federal laws and regulations and permit requirements. Pay your grazing fees religiously. If they say you're in non-compliance, get out of non-compliance. Don't give that agency any leverage on you, period. And then start getting ready to take them on, if you need to, if you can't sell it nicely. If you fail to pay your grazing fees, you've been told this before, but I'm going to repeat it, because I'm one of the guys in BLM that used to do that in my 31 years working with them. If you fail to do it, the government will have legal grounds to take irreversible, and I'll repeat that, irreversible action on your grazing permits and discredit in the end, any valid complaint you may have had against the agency. So pay your fees. It's not being a chicken doing that, it's being smart. Use this thing up here, the noodle. Be smarter than they are. Play chess with them. That's what I do. I used to play competitive chess when I was younger. Anyway, and I didn't like losing either. So the next thing is change the U.S. Forest Service grazing appeal regulations. How many of you appealed the Forest Service before? Anybody appealed the Forest Service actions in here before? I'm telling you what, it's the nastiest, most arduous, pain in the neck thing I've ever dealt with in my life. And all I do is see one Forest Service officer after the other telling me no in the appeal process, because it's totally internal. It's the fox in charge of the chicken hutch. And when this administration changes, there's going to be a strong move to rewrite those regulations, I assure you, to stop that from happening in the future. I couldn't believe it. I went from one forest ranger to the next ranger. And I said, when am I going to get somebody that is actually a legal person? Never did. And I'll give you the example of that case later. Change and consolidate the U.S. Forest Service grazing regulations. They're confusing. Their own people don't know how to use them. How do I know that? Because I have worked with their own people. Confused me, I figured it out finally, but they were really confused. Worked to my advantage in some cases. You always take advantage, wouldn't you say? Like when you ride a bucking horse, you take all the advantage you can. That's part of the reason why my ankle was worn out and had to get a new one. Am I getting any of this later? I got that because I have to point at some pictures here in a minute. Okay, the next thing is, it's been addressed earlier, and there appears to be a lot more going on than I thought. We need to address the private water rights issues. There's a federal land grab that's been going on for years. The state of Utah is way ahead of the curve. I'm not going to elaborate on that. The seventh thing is modify the BLM regulations to make them more friendly to public land livestock grazing without requiring an environmental impact statement to get the regulations approved. Clinton started that, and it's turned into a disaster. All you got to do is pass the right law, and you don't have to do that anymore. That's what it's all about. NEPA's a law, by the way. It can be changed. In relation to the BLM and the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, change whatever past actions and or laws that have allowed the monument to decide it can move away from BLM regulation and mandates and be their own boss. And that can be legislated. And it must be, and it will be, if things happen the way we hope they do, soon. Take that to the bank. Have a law passed to modify NEPA to override any requirement for NEPA in relation to grazing permit renewal. I don't know why it hasn't been done already. The Clinton administration is what caused this this whole doggone thing of permit renewal by EA, environmental analysis, it's a joke. And we've all bought into it at the agency level. I know I had to do it for years. I wrote more environmental assessments than I'd like to admit. But a law can change all that, or modification to the NEPA with an additional law. That has to happen. Grazing permit renewal can't continually be locked up in litigation. And here's the bottom line is, we don't have a law, and we're saying we're going to do NEPA, but the monument's never done it yet, and most BLM offices in the state of Utah have never done it yet. They keep getting congressional riders on the bills from Congress so they can keep issuing temporary permits or annual permits. So why the heck don't we just pass a law and say it's not required? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. Maybe you guys, maybe somebody in here, maybe you got an answer to that. Why don't we just pass a law? That's what it's for. Okay, and this has been discussed, so I want to elaborate. Modify the Endangered Species Act, that's an absolute must. It has to happen. It was tried once and not much energy was put into it because of the Iraqi war. But it has to happen. That law, I work on numerous endangered species issues. So I'm working on the Sonoran District tortoise right now. And I can tell you, and I worked on the Mojave one before that. It's a disaster. It's just a power grab by environmental groups. That law has to be modified in some way. Take political and legislative and legal actions soon, as needed, to prevent any federal employees and agencies from violating their own laws, regulations, and their planning documents with impunity. That means with nobody can spank them. Okay? That has to change. It's impossible. The Bud Fallon Law Firm, which I work with on a regular basis out of Wyoming, took an agency, I won't mention all the details, took an agency to court, and they had absolute unadulterated proof of violating laws, regulations, all kinds of stuff. Never got anywhere. Never went anywhere. Because Fred said, well, I just told Jane this. And Jane said, well, I just told Henry this. And next thing you don't know who did it. It's true. Okay. Have legislation developed and passed to prevent the future establishment of any monuments by presidential decree, executive order, or whatever. That's 12, by the way. Probably not what you expected me to say. Okay, now I'm going to share with you 3 examples of reactive versus proactive actions that have occurred within the past 5 or so years in this state. 6 years, maybe, I'm not sure the exact number. And the results for each one of them, whether it was reactive, how they responded, or proactive. Then you decide what you want to do in the future. One of them is going to be about the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument and their attempts, failed attempts, since 1999 to do grazing permit renewal, NEPA. We still haven't done it. Why didn't we change the law? 2, the U.S. Forest Service's recent vegetation manipulation actions in Monroe Mountain and Box Creek and so on. And lastly, the U.S. Forest Service's 2007 Tusher collaboration effort, group growth type meeting. In relation to the monument has tried since 2001. They tried in 2001 to do site-specific environmental analysis by allotment, to do grazing permit renewal, failed. In 2008, they tried to do an EIS, failed. And in 2012, they tried to do an EIS, failed. Why did it fail? Because the politicians and the ranchers took a proactive approach and made certain, when they reviewed the documents, that they identified all the inappropriate, overreaching actions towards livestock grazing on the monument. And they made it politically dynamite for the monument to move forward, and they backed off. Kane and Garfield County made that happen, the commissioners over there. A gentleman named Mark Appelshaw was involved in that, in the earlier ones. Friend of mine. Could you put the slides up? I'm going to share with you the proactive approach, but because I didn't have anything to show but my ugly mug, I decided I would slam some pictures together last night when I realized there might be more than 30 people. What I'm showing you right here is the Paria River. I do have a pointer, so I'll try to, if I can find which pocket to put it in. Okay, and we'll have some close-ups. This is satellite imagery. I use everything when I do data collection. I don't leave any rock unturned. Anyway, this is the Paria River, the upper part of it. We were contracted in a proactive effort by Garfield and Kane County after the 2012 EIS, whereby they were implying that riparian areas had all gone to hell. And it was due to a four-legged animal that says moo. So we were hired by Kane and Garfield County to go out and collect data. Over a 3-year time period, data was collected, reports were written, detailed, not fancy pretty reports, detailed reports were written, showing unequivocally and undeniably that the riparian areas on the monument, every single one that we went to were the only ones we knew about. In fact, we found about 40 or so that the BLM didn't even know about. Accidentally, it's not making fun of them. You get out in the middle of nowhere, you don't find stuff until you turn a corner. Then all of a sudden, whoa, geez, there's a meadow. Okay? Well, what I'm showing you right here is satellite imagery. There's 2 meadows here that you can't believe. They're saline meadows right here. If you see, it's in the swirly area of the flow. The flow goes like this, I believe. Okay? So the water's going to come slamming down over here and maybe go over here and hit, but there's going to be little eddies in here. And there's also a little seep over here to contribute to it. And there was another meadow right here, which caused quite a rodeo on the way back out because there were deer flies. Anybody had trouble with deer flies before? I got bucked off my horse, and my partner who's here, where's Brent Owens at? Where? Brent Owens over there. He got bucked off earlier in the day. We're pretty old to be bucked off, but we're tough. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. So we found these 2 meadows. They're not in the BLM's record. It's not being critical of them. The bottom, but this is the close-up of what we named them. We got to name them because nobody knew they were there. So that's an old horse I had that I really liked, Big Boy. So I named that one of my old horses. Anyway, that's Big Boy Meadow. Both meadows are 2 acres in size. You can see how the sandstone up here sends down alluvium into them. And, okay, hold it right there. Back up one if you can. How many of you have you been to the Paria River? It looks like a big wash. Okay, it has a little trickle of water on it, and even surveyed it was comical to me to even call it a river. But it is a river, and environmental groups and some people in the BLM, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, all due to cows. ORV users. Get those ORV users the heck off there. They're tearing the hell out of that place. Well, the truth is that's not the truth. In fact, it's far from the truth. That's a high volume, episodic, sandstone watershed flood area. And that bottom gets washed out all the time. Well, how do you prove an area is in good condition when it looks like, to a judge especially, when it looks like a wash, like this right here, that picture. See the wash? Okay? Well, this is the meadow, one of the meadows. The next picture will take you to it. This area had been grazed that year. I believe Sean Stewart here is the range con on that one. Can you make it go forward one? This meadow not only was proper functioning, It was at the potential community for that type of a meadow, based upon the standards set by the U.S. Forest Service in a tech guide partially written by Al Windward. So what does that tell you about the rest of the wash area? It's proper functioning. Well, our report says that, and BLM bought into it. They didn't do it before, though, because they didn't know. And there were people telling them otherwise. Data. Okay? Let's go to, but is that clear to you guys that that's in good shape? That meadow? It's an alkaline meadow. Is that picture good enough for you to see that? The deer flies were there too. Anyway, you go to the next one if you would. This is right on the edge of it. This is called, oops, back up a little bit. Just one back. Did I make it go forward? I'm probably doing that with this thing. There we go. That's called laminar flow. And laminar flow is what like an airplane does. When the water comes rushing down, screaming down an old path of water, down the old Paria River, just ripping and tearing everything out in front of it. These plants here, this is a juncus here, have extremely dense root masses. They hold on for dear life. Oh, God, I'm going to hold on. And they flip over on their side. And the water goes screaming over the top of them. They're going, woo, man, get by. And it's called laminar flow because they're laid over flat. And the water goes smooth over the top of them. That laminar flow and root mass gives you, after the flow event, this appearance, if it's not buried in sediment. Because those same plants are designed and supposed to grab sediment. And I'll show you a picture of that. Go to the next one. Next one. Or I can do that, I guess, maybe. Let's see. No, I can't do it now. Can you make it go? Okay. I'm going to just go through it without telling you where these areas are. These are areas that, according to what we were told by the monument, they have been told by different outside groups, everything sucked but the pumps. Everything sucked but the pumps. Now that's a proper functioning and good condition riparian area. Most of you can see that. And in real time. Okay, go to the next one. That's Mark Habishaw right here. That's Brent Owens. That's all willows there. And the age class, those willows went all the way up to about 11 years old. From 1 year old. That's good. The monument had changed the management of that area. Grazing was still occurring, but they changed how it was occurring. John Stewart explained it all to us when we got together with him. They did a good job. They worked with the permittee. They didn't go over there and say, get out of here. They worked with it, okay? The end result was, that looks like it's not functional, doesn't it? It's bare ground, huh? Well, that area periodically dries up, and it gets those episodic events. This is Cottonwood Canyon. And that's always going to look that way. But when you see that kind of stability along the edges, that's a proper functioning and good condition riparian area. Go ahead. It's okay? Right, go to the next one. This is another riparian area where a big side event came down. If you look in the back here, that's a big meadow. This is natural and should occur from time to time when you get a 50-year event like that happened that year. And this is all grown over now. But I want to show you that some people will take you out on a site like that and tell you that the area is not functional based upon the guidelines. That's not correct. They haven't been trained properly on how to do proper functioning condition. One of the members on our team, Steve Leonard, was one of the co-authors of the proper functioning of riparian handbooks that everybody uses today. Okay, next one. This is another meadow. Next one. This side here looking that way, people will tell you that that's not a functional area. That's not correct. That's the slam side. That's where the water comes raging down that bottom and slams into that side and rips it apart. Nothing's going to hold that together. But that tells you that it's functional. All right? You got to have people that know that. Otherwise, they'll hit you and penalize you for that. All right. We can get ready for the next set. We'll let that one go. So, the proactive thing is that Kane and Garfield County took action. All three of those 2001, 2008, 2012 efforts weren't able to occur, And they also collected this data, which is going to go into the newest attempt at grazing permit renewal EIS. However, this new one is coming at it from a different angle. You can't come from riparian anymore. So they're going to be coming from archaeological, cryptobiotic, and paleontological. But we know that, and we're ready. Number two, there's been a number of Forest Service vegetation manipulation efforts in the state. And I mentioned to you that sometimes the agencies don't quite follow their laws. In the, if I can see where I wrote this down here, it's bear with me. Box Creek Hazardous Fuels Reduction Project in Sevier County. It's a 13-page, literally only a 13-page environmental assessment. As a result of that action, which is a good action, they built a 400-acre exclosure that did not keep elk out for the most part, but was used to keep the cattle out while the elk still got in grazing, which obviously prolonged the time the cattle could stay out for 2 or 3 years, costing the permitting money. We asked them where the NEPA was, where the environmental analysis required by law, for that exclosure. And they said, it's in the Box Creek 13-page hazardous fuels reduction project. We looked at it, we read it, it ain't in there. So Paiute County, proactively, is saying, like I mentioned to you earlier, see if they violate the law. Sometimes they do this accidentally, or with good intentions, not always maliciously. Has demanded in a letter the 15th of this month, was that 3 days ago now? Is that 3 days ago? That the U.S. Forest Service remove that 400-acre exclosure because it's illegal, or prove that it is legal. The next one is the Tusher, 2007 Tusher collaboration effort. If we can have those slides. Okay, this is on an allotment called 10 Mile Allotment. That was one of the ones that was picked. The Tusher collaboration effort was a result of environmental groups, 4 or 5 or 6 of them, I don't remember the exact number, appealing the Forest Service on their Tusher record of decision. The Forest Service went in a closed-door meeting with the environmental groups, all huddled around, came up with a settlement, and the settlement said there will be a collaboration. Environmentalists can pick one of the allotments that's going to be the test subject, and the Forest Service will pick the other. Ranchers had no input in who got picked. This allotment got picked. That's one of the riparian areas in it. Go to the next slide. That's in good shape, by the way. We went out and measured stubble height when the Forest Service said it was 3.2 inches. Who measures 0.2 inches? Anyway, I don't. We measured between 6 and 14 inches. If you look at this picture, this is not a good one, and I didn't want to bore you with too many pictures. What happens is this vegetation lays over and becomes recumbent. And you've got to rake it up with your fingers if you know how to do the methodology for stubble height. And get the actual plants that are there, that have been pushed over flat when you measure stubble height. You can't just measure the ones that are up. I hope you all can see that. So we went out and measured the data. Keep going, if you would. This is just some examples of after this year when it was used. This is what one of the, used to be a active gully. I'll show you the satellite imagery here in a minute. It's all healed. It was claimed by environmental groups that all the aspen had no good age classes, so we went out and age classed every aspen stand, and that's how we age classed it. I don't guess. Never have. If I want to know the age of something, I find out what it is. The one on the lower was 6, and I think the other was on 16 or something like that. This is an area that's been grazed. You can see how vigorous and healthy and the diverse age class of aspen that are in that area. Go ahead. The Forest Service paid for a riparian analysis report that told them that this Rosgan, it's called a Rosgan A or A plus stream bed type, should not have all this timber laying across it like that. So I went out there after reading that report, and I thought, that's exactly what it's supposed to have. Roskin type A stream types are stabilized by just that type of thing. So the Forest Service spent lots of money for a pretty report that told them that that probably wasn't necessary. And they should do something about it. Our report didn't say that. Anyway, if you do the next one, it's satellite imagery that shows you that that's extensive throughout the whole reach. I don't know if you can tell, but by looking at where you're sitting, but there's all kinds of log jams up and down that creek. Okay? It's natural. It's supposed to be there. If it isn't there, you get a little worried. Okay, next picture, back up. Okay, no, go forward now, I'm sorry. Okay, in our data, we consistently indicated in this illegal exposure, one of the illegal exposures the Forest Service built in this guy's allotment, 50 acres, with no NEPA. We indicated to them that all of our data was telling us clearly that all these meadows that we were seeing happened within the last 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 at the most. And that's when the permittee who hired us to do the job took the permit over. That same time period. Good steward, turns out to be. If you look here, right where that blue line is, today there's a meadow. A meadow, and you'll see it in the next picture, there is no meadow there. From historic grazing, the water table probably had changed, and whatever meadow used to be there was overtaken by sagebrush. It's a common occurrence in sagebrush communities. But guess what happens when the water table rises from good stewardship from the rancher? Could you go to the next slide? Now you got a meadow. This is in 2006 because I wanted to use black and white, but in 2005 it shows the same thing. So from 1995 to 2005, in 10 years that guy took that permit, he had meadows forming all over the place. I'll show you other things he had forming, which is corroborated by our ground data as well. Okay, go to the next one. That just shows you the meadow in a color photo. That's the meadow that was not there in 1993. Go ahead. Now, this is an active gully that we told the Forest Service must have occurred there, based upon all of our data. And in 1993, the satellite imagery definitively proves that it did. Next photo. Now, I used this photo, it's 2009, because I thought it would show better for you on this large screen. But actually, the 2005 photo has a fully formed meadow in it already. But if you can see the meadow in this, he jumped to the 2014 one. That's all meadow now. That's no longer a gully. Good stewardship. All right. What was the Forest Service's actions on this guy? The reactive part was this. From a reactive standpoint, it cost the permittee $1,080,000 over a 5-year time period. And that's only in livestock sale cost. It cost him that much because they required him to do a 60% so-called voluntary reduction. It wasn't voluntary. They just didn't issue a decision. 60% reduction for 5 years. Work with us. We'll work with you. Established a 30%, this is factual, a 30% utilization never exceed standard when their land use plan says they're supposed to use 40 to 60%. They violated their land use plan. My goodness. And they held this guy to that 30% and issued him notices of noncompliance this whole 5-year time period. He was taking so-called voluntary non-use, 60% non-use. Then they built exclosures and allowed environmental groups to build exclosures all over that allotment without any environmental analysis required by law. Required by law. Not my opinion. Okay? Now, okay, I've been told to cut it off. I'm sorry. I hope it was interesting. But the bottom line is, these are examples of violations of law that you can identify. And the decision that was appealed after the 60% use so-called voluntary, the Forest Service issued a permanent. This is their reward for the permittee. Issued a permanent 40% reduction decision in 2014. We were hired. The decision got 100% reversed in June of 2015. It ain't over. Okay? So recognize if you can identify violations of law, procedure, planning documents, it's very important for you as a permittee. It's something more easy, a little more easy for you to do sometimes to find any time to collect data. And lastly, most federal employees are easy to work with. I got a lot of friends who are still federal employees. Feel sorry for them. But most of them are very good people, and their heart's in the right place, at least in this state. And they have good morals and standards, and they're going to treat you fair. But sometimes they'll goof up. So make sure you're aware of whether or not it's 60% use allowed or 30% allowed in the planning document. Thank you.
Well, I'd like you to all give a round of applause to all of our presenters today. I think we've had an awesome program.